Hi, this is Fiona again, doing another little video for you for the British Polymer Clay Guild with Lizzie doing the camera work. Thanks, Lizzie. What we thought we'd do this time is a nice little rose cane for you. Again, it's one of the most popular ones we do at the NEC in Birmingham when we're doing stuff for the Guild. So we thought it would be nice to have a little video so that we can refer people to that when they go up to the stand at the NEC. It's also a nice one to do because it involves a skinner blend. So for those of you who've never done a skinner blend before, this is a nice little example for it. I'm going to do a fairly traditional colour scheme this time, so I've got white, fuchsia and a lilac colour. I'm going to do a three-way colour blend for the skinner blend for the rose, and then the petals we're going to outline in the darker purple. So I've cut myself a roughly similar shape rectangle for both of these colours, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to diagonally cut down each of them. Now you'll notice when I've cut, I haven't cut quite to the corners, I've sort of gone in slightly, so if I show you that, and I'm going to turn each piece on its side and layer them all up. And the reason I do that is because I'm using Fimo Soft in this particular one. And those of you who use Fimo will know that you only need a very small amount of white, of colour, in order to make the white go a different colour. So I always tend to add a little bit of extra white on the end, just to give me a little bit extra to play with. I'm also going to add an insert on this one. So I've got 2 layers of the white, 2 layers of the pink. So with this lavender colour, I'm just going to fold it in half. And I'm going to cut myself a strip of this, so I now do have those 2 layers. Make sure the folds are nicely pressed down so there's no air trapped in between. Layer that one up like that, layer that one like that, and then if you chop across the top and across the bottom, we're going to give ourselves a nice skinner blend. And the way I always try and describe the skinner blend to people is that we always fold top to bottom, or even bottom to top. And if you think about it, that's then going to give you a creative colour scheme where right across the whole blend you're going to get all of these different colours. Now all of these clays have been obviously conditioned first, and I put them all through on a setting number 3. Because I've got 2 layers, I'm just going to put my pasta machine now on setting number 2, and then going back to it, I always want to keep all the white on one side and all the pink on the other, so I know automatically I'm going to fold those up that way. And I tend to do that fold first and do it have 2 layers of clay on a slightly thinner setting, because then I don't have that problem with the clay spreading apart and separating when I put it through the pasta machine for the first time. So putting it through to the pasta machine, and as we always do, I'm going to use my hand underneath to collect the clay as it comes through. And because you do that, you then know automatically to turn top to bottom. Ignore the fact that there's red on the white, that's all going to come out in the wash in a minute. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to flip it like that. This is a tip that came from Sarah Shriver, and she sort of said at the time, any of you do skinner blends where you find that they're constantly coming out where they go slightly squiff like that? And we all went, oh yes. And she said that's because your pasta machine should, you think the rollers would be completely sort of straight like that, but they tend to do that or do that. So if you don't flip it each time you go through, you won't end up with a nice rectangular piece. So having done that a couple of times, so you can see what I'm doing, I'm just going to speed up now. This isn't sped up camera work, this is just me speeding up so that you're not sat for ages watching a video. Because one thing about the skinner blend is it does take sort of 20 or so times before that blend comes through. But you can see it's starting to come through now with that nice mix of colours. And having those, putting the 3 colours in just adds a certain something sometimes, and you can get the most wonderful colour mixes. So just experiment and see what comes out. Now, when you're sitting at home doing this nice and quietly, you can put it through as many times as you like to get a really smooth blend. I'm probably going to stop in a couple more, just so that you get the rough idea of what we're doing. But you can see there, I've got quite a nice blend coming through of all the colours, and it is staying somewhat oblong. I'm just going to pull that slightly there because I like to make it even more oblong. So what I'm going to do now is I want that blend, but I want to change the shape of it. So in order to do a rose cane, I'm going to fold it in on itself. So effectively I've got 3 layers, because I like to work about 1.5 inches, 3 to 4 centimetres in width, because that way when you're doing what we call cane work, where the pattern runs from one side through to the other, you haven't got too much distortion. So I'm just going to pinch the ends together to make sure there's no air trapped, and as per usual, folds are always on the side so that any air that might be trapped in the side gets pushed up towards the middle. On exactly the same setting, I'm going to put it through. I'm holding the end as I go through. The reason you hold this end is because if you don't, it might go to one side or other of the pasta machine. You don't worry about what happens on the bottom, but what you get then is a nice longer piece with a blend from one side to the other. You can, if you want to, then gradually go down each setting down the pasta machine because I like to do things quickly, I go straight down to number 9. Those of you who don't do this, just close your eyes at that point. Pretend I went all the way down through the rest. And then again, all I'm doing is I'm holding onto the top bit. I'm not worrying about the bottom bit at all, but I'm just holding onto that to make sure it doesn't go all over the place. And then just keep going all the way down. And what you should end up with is a nice concertina that when you open it out, gives you a really lovely long piece of clay where the blend goes from one colour from one end right the way through to the other. So in a rose cane, what we're going to want to do is to concertina it. So I'm going to start at this end and I'm going to start folding it. So I want to fold it about 3/4 of an inch, about 2 centimetres long, and then just keep going backwards and forwards. Again, if you're doing this nicely at home, take your time. I'm going to do this quickly so that you get the rough effect, because one of the things I've found is that you don't have to do it quickly. One of the reasons I love doing anything related to flower work or petals or anything like that is it doesn't matter if each slice is slightly different. So because of that, I'm not going to be as detailed as I would be if it's something like a kaleidoscope cane. So you can see how messy that is. Okay, well that's great, because in polymer clay, of course, we just squidge. So I'm squidging the middle bits first so that any of the air stuck in those sides is going to get pushed out towards the top, and then just work both sides towards the top, making sure you've got no air trapped. And then, because that for me is quite tall, I only want it about that height, I'm going to do that squidging again. Just heel of my hand, press down, and I'm not at all worried about it going out of shape or being slightly round or even square, because as I say, each petal is going to be slightly different. So that is your rough petal shape, where we've got one's white at one side going all through that lilac up towards the fuchsia. So now I'm just going to take a piece of the purple, and again we roll this through on setting number 3. I'm just going to put it through on setting number 4 just to make it slightly thinner, and it's up to you to decide what proportion you want it to be compared to your piece. But I'm going to take my log of clay there, cut off to give myself an end there, and using the tissue blade, use that to measure above and below the height of my rose cane. And then just take this piece and wrap it round. If it's slightly bigger, the purple, that's fine, because you'll find that it sometimes pulls out when you're reducing a cane. If you pull your finger down there, you can see where that join is, and with my craft knife I'm just cutting through and just pulling those together to make sure the join fits. And there we have one petal for our rose cane. But the way I do it, and again there's loads of rose cane tutorials out there, and I've sort of used over the years a mixture of loads of them, but have a look and see if you want to see other ways of doing it. I'm just going to fold that little bit of purple just over the top just so it covers over. But I tend to work on a formula, because I do this so often up with the NEC. It's good to give people a formula to work to know that when they go home they can do the same measurements and they'll get the same effect. So I know I want this one piece to go into about 10 pieces. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reduce the cane. That means I'm going to make it smaller but much longer and thinner. But the thing with polymer clay is that the pattern stays the same. So I start doing this by just pressing in at the very ends, and then I'll make sure that the ends stay flat slightly, pressing in again. I always think it looks like a weird sort of covered sweet at this stage, but that's all I'm doing, pressing down. And then when I've got it to a certain stage, I can start rolling with my hand. And all I'm doing is just rolling this out, and I tend to roll from the middle towards the edges. And it's good to turn it around every so often, because you'll tend to find that one of your hands tends to put more pressure on than another one, and I can feel I've got a few air bubbles in there. So I'm just going to take my craft knife and just pop the air bubbles. We're going to do a lot more manipulation of this cane, so I know they're not going to worry, they're not going to be too important, those air bubbles at this stage. But if you see big ones, get them out when you see them, because it's better rather than leaving them to later. Now I know from experience I want this to be about 6 inches, 15 centimetres long. So I have here a measuring sheet, which I should have cleared off earlier. This is available from thepolymerparrot.com, Great Starts. And it's done in inches, but obviously you can just get a piece of graph paper if you want and do it in centimetres as well. And I need this to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and luckily, so I've done this so often, that was just about perfect. So I'm now going to chop off 3 1-inch pieces, so that would be 2.5 centimetres if you're working in centimetres. And you can see there how you've got that nice blend down the middle of all your pieces. So those are your large pieces. I now want to reduce this to, it's the same thing, about 6 inches in length. So I'm doing exactly the same, just rolling it on my tile, starting from the middle and pulling it out as I go to keep it nice and straight and smooth. And when it's, I think, roughly about those 6 inches, a little bit more. It's because I haven't got too much distortion on that end. I know I can use that piece as well. I'm going to take 1, 2, 3 pieces. These will be my middle size pieces for the rose. And then I know from experience I want this piece to be about 4 inches in length. So I'm going to do that. I know I've got a bit of wastage on the end here where it isn't quite even. So I'm going to do that, and that'll be my 1, 2, 3 small petals. And then this last piece will be my inner coil of the rose. And when you're doing a rose, if you look at a rose, the middle part is quite tightly coiled petals. And the easiest way to do this is to, on a sheet like this, so it's not going to stick, I'm using my thumb to press down, and then I will use my roller to get that middle bit really quite thin. And I'll pick that up for you in a minute so you can see at a better angle how that looks. Okay, so what we then do is you just, with your fingers, roll very gently from this end, roll it up. Don't worry about it becoming uneven. We'll just squidge that. It's a term we use all the time. But you can see you've already started to get your roll in the middle. When you're working with canes, never mind about how distorted the end looks. That's not important. It's when we slice through and see what we've got in the middle. That's the important bit. So I'm going to put that piece on one side. Now we're going to start manipulating our petal shapes. Now obviously at the moment that's just a round shape. That looks like nothing like a petal. What we're going to do is we're going to take our thumbs and fingers and we're going to create a diamond shape in the middle like that. And as you press in, that will give you a nice shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press in towards the middle, and can you see that gives you a nice shape. What you're then going to do is turn it the other way up, because you'll be amazed how many times in just that 1 inch, 2.5 centimetres length, it switches round. So do the same, and then if you need to adjust that at all, you can do. And I know from experience as well with these 3 outer bits that I want these to be much wider than the others, because I like them to go the whole way around the rose. So I'm just going to pull them wider. I've got it sat down firmly on the bottom, so it gives me something to hold on to. And I'm going to do that with all 3 pieces. So you'll see it repeated. So top, bottom, check there's nothing in between, and then pull it nice and wide. I always recommend as well, when you're doing this, you start with the big pieces, because this is such a weird feeling doing this pressing thing with your thumb and fingers, that if you start with the big ones, by the time you get down to the little ones, your fingers will be very used to that technique. So those are my 3 large ones done. Same with the middle ones. So top, bottom, and pull down. These ones don't need to be so wide. 1, 2, 3. Bottom. Actually, these haven't turned too much at all. Quite often when you're doing this, you'll find that they've turned a lot, which is why I would always recommend, say, doing this top and bottom. So those are the small ones. And then it's just a case of putting them all together. I see that one has turned slightly more, so I can readjust that one like that. Okay, so having done all of that, that was almost the longest bit of the whole demo. What you've got to do now is to put them all together. And the thing to remember when you're doing a rose cane is you find your swirly bit in the middle, and each petal always overlaps the next one all the way around. And you have to decide at this point which colour you want to put towards the middle and which colour you're going to put towards the outside. So I think on this one I'm going to have the deep pink towards the middle. So then I'm going to find where my outer bit is of the middle cane and literally just force this to curl around. So that's one small piece, and then do the next one, and then do the next one, always keeping the purple, bright purple in the middle, and then the white towards the outside. You'll also find it gets longer, so that technical term again, we're going to switch. And then the middle pieces. There's number 1. There's number 2. And there's number 3. And then the outer pieces will always be a lot shorter because I've manipulated them so much and made them much wider, but hopefully, actually I might need to make those wider still. This is quite a nice big rose. You pull those around, and again, don't ever worry about what the outside looks like or the top of your cane looks like. It's what's in the inside that's important. So there's number 2, and then hopefully we should just about push him in slightly more. Just about have it so it's just about going to stretch around. Great thing about polymer clay, of course, you can just squidge it. Okay, and then you have the moment of truth, that moment in the NEC where you always cross your fingers thinking, please work. And when you cut down through, you should have a rose cane. and that is how to do a very quick and easy rose cane. We did a skinner blend there, and I used a formula, so if you just follow through on or watch the instructions or rewind again, you'll see it was just 6 inches, 15 centimetres, cut off 3 pieces, same again, same length, cut off 3 pieces, remaining piece put into 4 pieces, manipulate the shapes, put together, and it is that simple. Enjoy.